All right, welcome to the WanderLearn show. I'm your host, Tapon. I'm here with Eric Gilbertson, who is climbing, or at least on the road to climb the tallest peak of every single country. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks.
So tell me about this story. Start with the first thing, like what's a country?
Different people have different definitions, but I go by the United Nations. So there's 193 UN members, and there's two non-member observer states, the Holy See and Palestine. So that's 195. So that covers every piece of land on Earth except Antarctica. So then I put Antarctica in there too. So every piece of land is covered. So 196 that I use.
But there's something that's very interesting the way you do it, in the sense that you pick the tallest peak of the country. So most people, when they think of the UK, they think of Ben Nevis, which is in Scotland, but you actually pick South Georgia Island in the Atlantic Ocean, correct?
Yeah, so I include any like overseas territories, any land that the country owns, excluding foreign embassies. So UK has a bunch of, they own like South Georgia and some other islands. So the highest point of land on any land owned by the UK is Mount Paget on South Georgia. And so similar, like Denmark owns Greenland. So the high point of Denmark would be Gunnbjørnfjella in Greenland. So it makes it a little bit harder than climbing the mainland high point. But if you don't do that, it seems a little more rigorous to me. Every piece of land is part of a country in that definition.
Right, exactly. No land is free, except for maybe the Sentinel Island.
Wait, where is that? I haven't heard of that one.
Oh, Sentinel Island is a tiny island off the coast of India. Luckily for you, it doesn't have a high point, because every single person who's ever gone there has been killed.
Is that the one where India, there's like a native tribe and they don't want foreigners to contact them? Oh, okay. I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, so thank God for you, it's not the tallest point of India.
I did get that one last month, or a couple weeks ago, Kanchenjunga, India high point.
Okay, great. All right, and so the first thing that a lot of people might think of is Mount Everest, and some people, if they're more sophisticated, will think of K2. Go ahead and tell us that story.
Yeah, I was on Everest this spring. I didn't quite get to the top. I was trying it without oxygen, which makes it like 10 times harder. No oxygen, no Sherpas carrying my stuff. So I got just below the South Summit, and that was as high as I could make it.
South Summit, for those who don't know, is very, very, very close to the top. I mean, you're right below the Hillary step, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I was at about 8,500 meters. So a couple hundred meters. Yeah, the problem was I didn't get enough rotations. Rotations are you tag a high elevation and go sleep low, and you go tag a higher elevation and sleep low, and that helps you acclimate. I didn't get enough rotations, but I tried it. I decided I'd try it anyway. Didn't quite work though.
Okay, so tell us where you went to do these rotations. Didn't you go climb another peak?
We hiked up to base camp, which is like 5,300 meters. And my plan was to do rotations up on the route so I could double carry my gear. I have to do things a little differently because I didn't have any Sherpas carrying stuff for me. I was doing it on my own. But they had the ice fall closed because of an accident for a couple weeks. So instead, we climbed the 6,000 meter peak La Bouche East beforehand. It was kind of near base camp, like a day away.
And this was with your brother?
Yeah, my brother and two friends.
Okay, so there's four of you in total.
Yeah.
Now, of all the four of you, were you all going without oxygen?
No, just me. I mean, of like 1,000 people that go up Everest, there's only 4 that I know of that were doing what I did, with no oxygen, no Sherpa, just kind of going on your own. Yeah, it was me, Sillard from Hungary, Mateo from Colombia, Sajid from Pakistan, and Roland. So me and 4 other guys.
And what does the trip set you back? Because you still have to pay the permit fees, which are at least $10,000 minimum.
Yeah, the permit's like $11,000. Then I had to pay for like getting my gear up to base camp, and then food and tent in base camp, and then permission to use the fixed ropes. But I'm still paying less than half of what anyone else pays. That's the main reason to do it, to save a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think bragging rights to some extent. I mean, you're going up, as Reinhold Messer said, with fair means.
Yeah, oxygen makes it 10 times easier, I've discovered. So I ended up the logistics company I was with, they kind of forced me. They said you can't do Kanchenjunga unless you use oxygen because they actually so after Everest I was planning to do Kanchenjunga, the India high point. It's the third highest mountain in the world. So I would capitalize on my acclimation and just do that quickly. And I got to 8,500 on Everest, and Kanchenjunga is 8,500. So I could certainly get up there. But there were two active rescues going on. One climber, the Hungarian guy, he was going solo no 2 on Everest, and that day, May 24th, he didn't come down, so they were sending a rescue for him. There was also another solo no 2 climber on Kanchenjunga that same day who didn't return, so they were sending a rescue for him. So they didn't want me, another solo no 2 oxygen climber, going up there. So they said, okay, you have to go with oxygen and Sherpa. So I said, okay. I mean, that's the only way. So I did Kanchenjunga with oxygen. But man,
Okay.
that's 10 times easier. It's like a totally different ball game.
Right. What a concept. Being able to breathe makes a difference. Who would have known?
I mean, it's more than it like gives you energy. Like
And
every
warmth
step.
too. Warmth.
Exactly. That slowed me down. Every 10 minutes on Everest summit push, I was stopping to warm up my fingers and my
Yeah.
toes. That
Yeah.
basically doubled the time.
Yeah.
Kanchenjunga, I could go 5 hours, didn't have to eat, didn't have to stop to rest, didn't have to warm anything up. It's just amazing. Total game
Yeah.
changer.
Yeah, yeah. It makes you really respect people like Reinhold Messner and others who have gone up Everest without oxygen. But I think you certainly could have done it just had you just been able to go Kanchenjunga first, maybe use that as your acclimatizing thing, and then gone to Everest.
Yeah, it's a little risky though, because for Everest, they can close the ice fall whenever they want. So this year, May 25th, I think it was, they're like, we're pulling the ladders, ice fall's closed. You can't summit after that. But Kanchenjunga, there's nothing like that. You can go whenever. So, and the windows are kind of the same. So if Kanchenjunga takes a little longer than expected and you can only get to Everest like May 23rd or something, not enough time. They'll pull the ladders. So it kind of makes sense to prioritize Everest. Also, it's the more expensive peak
Right, but
with the
why
permits.
not do some other mountain that is pretty high, around 8,000 meters or more, like, and then use that as your acclimatizing hike?
Well, mainly for cost for this trip. I mean, the permits are expensive and it'd probably add like $10,000. But I think
Even
that's
sorry, even a mountain like I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Cho Ul or something like that.
yeah,
It's
Choyu permit. China, it was actually closed this spring, so that wasn't an option. I mean,
oh,
Kristen
okay.
Harrell got a permit, but that's a really special situation. Not any average person could do that.
Because
But
that's like
that's my
14,000. That's one of the 14,000 14 8,000 meter peaks. One of the shortest ones and one of the easiest ones according to my research.
yeah, and in fact, I think that's the way to I think that's the best way to get a no-O2 ascent of Everest. The problem with acclimating on Everest, it's first of all, you're basically guaranteed to get sick. There's like 2,000 people in base camp. There's hundreds of trekkers coming in every day. Basically, everyone I knew got sick this year, and I got sick and lost 2 weeks, and that's I think didn't allow me to get the rotations. Also
Hmm.
on Everest, they can close the ice fall whenever they want. They had it closed until mid-April, so we couldn't go up, and then they
But
closed it at the
Eric,
end.
why not just do the North Face?
So that was closed this spring. They haven't opened it yet.
Oh,
And also, my friends have told in China have told me they don't allow no to ascents on the northeast ridge.
oh,
That might be a
okay.
new development.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be a deal breaker. Um, Now, you did go without oxygen up K2, which is a tougher mountain in many ways, aside from the fact that it's, I think, what, 300 meters or about 1,000 feet shorter than Everest, roughly?
Yeah, like 240 meters shorter.
Yeah, 240
So
meters.
it's
I was close. Give me,
86,111. They're really
right.
close.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's technically a much harder mountain. You've got the bottleneck and other challenges that you face. It's so much steeper. It's And to do that without oxygen is just blows my mind. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, that one, my friend Andres and I, we did without oxygen or Sherpas also, and I was feeling totally fine on the top. And I think it was because we did more acclimation rotations. We were able to. So we climbed Broad Peak first. It's just a little over 8,000.
Right.
And we actually kind of almost summited twice because the first time we turned around with bad weather. So we basically went to 8,000 twice. And then we moved to K2. And so then we were really well acclimated.
Right.
And we got stuck in a storm at Camp 3 for like 3 days up there. That was unexpected. So we didn't really have enough food. And we actually didn't bring a tent or sleeping bag up there because we were going to try to do fast and light. But we got stuck in a storm. We're going to go down, but we found this abandoned tent. So we just kind of shivered in there a couple nights without sleeping bags. And
Right.
the altitude suppresses hunger, so we didn't really need as much food.
Right.
So it was kind of extreme, but we were very well acclimated. So we didn't have any trouble getting up to the summit on that one.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Did you find a sleeping bag and use and share it or somehow or something like that? Or no?
The first night we coordinated with two of our friends. They had left their tent up there, and we were shifted by a day. So the first night we stayed in their tent, and we had one sleeping bag that we shared. But then they came up, and we were just going to go down and bail and go back to base camp. But a Sherpa told us this one tent was abandoned. And it wasn't very good because half of the underside of the tent was fallen off of this like cliff. So there's
So you
only
get
half
some
of it.
and you had cold air coming up through it, I imagine. Or no?
Well, yeah, that wasn't good. But also we couldn't both sleep like this. We had to sleep like on our sides
Sideways.
to fit.
Yeah.
So we didn't really get too much sleep.
Yeah. It's crazy. Was it? What surprised you about K2?
The biggest danger I hadn't known about in advance was the rockfall. So below Camp 2, it's really dangerous. There's a lot of loose rock. If there's any climber going down and they're not super careful, they can dislodge one. And one that was like grapefruit size hit me in the leg, and I thought I'd have to bail. But I limped up to Camp 1, and it hit me in the muscle, not the bone. So luckily, it improved over time. But we waited until there was like 150 people went up in the first weather window, and we waited for them to all clear out. That'd be super dangerous with rockfall. When we went, there was only one party above us, but they were still kicking down rocks. So it was still kind of dangerous.
How many people actually got incapacitated or had to quit their hike because of a rockfall in K2 when you were there? Approximately like 5, 10?
Yeah, probably 5 or 10. I didn't.
Yeah.
They don't all get reported. Like one of my friends got hit and moved down. I got hit. The group of 150, I didn't really talk to anyone in that group. I'm sure there were problems there.
Right. How much did it cost, K2?
I really just paid for the permit, was like $2,000.
Okay, so it's not that bad compared to Everest. Wow.
Oh, yeah, no way. I think they've increased it now, but I paid for Broad. The Broad permit was like $2,000, and then it was like a couple thousand for the logistics company to bring our gear in. You have to hike everything in Nepal. You can't take helicopters in in Pakistan. You have to hike everything in. Not like in Nepal, they just helicopter stuff in.
Mm-hmm.
So total Broad plus K2 is maybe 5,000 or 6,000.
And what about Kanchenjunga in India?
If you just pay for the permit and logistics, it's like 10,000.
Okay. And how far are you along on your quest? You got 193, or do you call it 195 countries? What do you say?
Then if you include Antarctica, 196.
Right.
Like a bonus point.
So
I'm like 2/3 done.
Which is remarkable, especially since you knocked off K2. Everest is within grasp. What's your plan for Everest?
I'd like to return and try without oxygen. I mean, I think the idea would be acclimate on a different peak beforehand, and then I would get sick at base camp.
Eric, why try without oxygen if, let's say, you've kind of already done Kanchenjunga with oxygen? Why not just, you're not trying to be a complete purist, obviously, regarding oxygen. Why not just say, okay, well, I'm just going to do oxygen. I know it's expensive to buy oxygen too. How much does it cost?
They said if I wanted to have a Sherpa with me with oxygen, it'd be an extra like $12,000. So it's pretty significant.
Yeah.
I mean, one option would be to have a Sherpa hike with me with oxygen, and then if I need it, then I use it.
Right.
I don't
Right.
know
But then
though.
you gotta still pay the 12,000 either way.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess
Hmm.
one consideration is failing again and going back a third time would be more expensive than going with oxygen.
I don't think you're a complete purist. Obviously, you would like to go without oxygen because of the challenge and because of the sense of accomplishment. But you're not obviously a purist. Had you been a purist, you would have said no in India. You would have said no, I'm not going to go.
Well, I guess I'm also a cheapskate because if I had said no, I would have lost like $15,000 that I invested already in permits and
Mm,
everything.
right.
And so going with oxygen there was the only way to get it.
Right.
But
Okay.
I
What if you get a big sponsor like North Face who listens to this podcast and say we want to sponsor that Eric guy, and then they give you like a big budget of 100 grand? What would you do then?
I guess then I could try multiple times without it, but maybe with a Sherpa accompanying. I mean, I
Hmm.
felt pretty. It felt kind of wrong with the oxygen on Kanchenjunga, like I was a cyclist on like taking some drugs or something. It's just so different. It's like someone just like puts a motor on me and I can go without getting tired. It just totally
Right.
different experience.
It's like going up a peak that's 1,000 meters, and you're like, oh, this is easy.
Yeah, people say that it's lowers the apparent altitude, but it's way more than that. It maybe it does that, but it also like injects energy in you, like puts a motor in you,
And heats you up, like we talked about too.
and it heats you up so you can save all kinds of time. It's like ten
Yeah. No,
times easier.
no, not only that, but you not only heats you up, but also that allows you to maybe take fewer clothes too, or like that decreases your weight. You don't have to bring the
Exactly.
ultra huge parka that goes down to negative 50
Right.
versus.
That's exactly. So I was going up from base camp, and the Sherpas were like, "Why are you taking so many clothes?" So I had worn every single layer and my downsuit over all that on Everest on Summit Push, and I was still a little bit cold. And then Kanchenjunga, like, yeah, no, just base layer underneath and then the downsuit, totally fine. Saved a lot of weight.
Totally. When were you at your coldest? Was it on K2 or somewhere else?
K2 was probably the coldest, just before sunrise. Like every 10 minutes or so, my fingers and toes are getting numb. I tried some improvements on Everest, like wearing over boots over my 8,000 meter boots, plus battery heated socks, and then the gloves I had battery heated liners and like another glove on over mitt. But the problem is the Everest season is earlier in May instead of July, so it was like 10 degrees Fahrenheit colder.
All right.
So still got cold there.
Yeah, I believe it. And the altitude is incredible, and the wind whipping is really high. It almost always has that kind of lenticular cloud or whatever that thing, that plume that goes off the top. I imagine you saw that so often, right?
Yeah, and I also kind of chose a slightly more marginal weather day to go because I kind of need to avoid crowds without oxygen. So if I'm standing in a line for an hour not moving, then I get a lot colder without oxygen.
Mm,
So I was assuming that the crowds would go on the slightly better days. So indeed, the day I ended up moving up, it was great. There was hardly any people, and the
right,
weather was workable.
right.
I think one issue though, my first attempt, I thought the 21st was going to be good weather, and so I moved to Camp 4, South Call, and then at midnight and 1 a.m. it was just howling wind, too windy. So I had to spend an extra day at Camp 4 in the South Call, and so that's like
Mm,
8,000 meters without oxygen. So by the time I got to my high point, I'd been above 8,000 meters for like 40 hours, and I can't sleep at 8,000 meters, can't breathe as much without oxygen. So I had to pull
right.
two all nighters. So that might
Mm,
have affected me uh, getting like symptoms of haste at 8,500 meters.
right.
I'm not
And
sure
HACE
exactly.
is high altitude cerebral edema, for those who don't know. It's really debilitating to try to sleep in the dead zone. I think it's basically almost impossible. Few people do it unless you have
Yeah,
oxygen.
I could sleep at 7,600 meters on K2. Maybe I was better acclimated. But
Yeah, that's true
8,000
too.
on Everest, I couldn't fall asleep.
Right. Because you're just breathing so hard and heavy and you're cold. Right.
Yeah, what I found was my respiration rate starts going down when I start to fall asleep. But then I'm almost fall asleep, but the respiration's too low. I'm not getting enough oxygen, and I wake up gasping.
Got it.
And I was doing that for hours. It just didn't work. So the
That's
key,
crazy.
so the strategy is move like camp 2 to camp 4, just rest a couple hours and keep going up. Minimize time in the death zone.